Hi, this is Shoshana Brigette from colorkarma.com. I am here with Ryan Stanley from PVH. Thank you very
Hello,
much for joining us.
good to be here.
So, Ryan, last time we talked, we were talking about color and digitization, right?
Yes,
But we touched briefly on virtualization.
right,
And virtualization is kind of this in-between stage for me of how we can get the creative community to start trusting digital a bit
right.
more. And so, for those who don't know what virtualization is, you're actually virtually trying to show what a material looks like and behaves like digitally on a screen. How are you using that, or how do you perceive virtualization inside the PVH workflow?
Right. So there's a distinction in nomenclature, right? You have virtualization, just to start. You have
Yeah,
virtualization and then you have visualization, right? So you want to make sure that you can virtualize an object, virtualize a material such that it's as analogous to its real life counterpart as possible. So you can visualize it in a way that makes everybody throughout the chain comfortable, particularly design or those in execution, so they know how to execute what design wanted in the first place. I think that there are, and we had multiple conversations about this, and I said it before, I'll say it again, I'll sound like a broken record. You really changed my mind in regards to requiring a bit of an interim step. Typically, I'm somebody who just wants to jump straight to Z. Like if it can be done, then it should be done. But there's a level of comfort in the industry that comes from being able to see those steps.
hmm
So to that point, I think that if you can define a set of material specifications and use hardware and software to showcase that a material has been properly virtualized such that it is equal to its real life counterpart virtually, um, then and only then will the people in the industry be able to move forward, right? So what there's the total appearance capture device from X-Rite,
right,
there's
the tech.
the TAC, right? There's the MetaView, I think that's also from X-Rite.
Yeah,
There's the SpectraVision, I believe,
SpectraVision from
from
Data Color.
Datacolor.
hmm
I even think there's some legacy systems out there that have been around for quite some time. Actually, DigiEye, I think, is one of them.
Vizu
Um,
is another.
that's right. So I think all of these, to varying degrees, of course,
hmm
the varying levels of specificity, but these types of objects, it's not just necessarily, taking a material on a flatbed scanner. It's being able to accompany that multi-angled spectral snapshot of the
Yep.
material to get it as accurate as possible, but also partner with the RM team, partner with the raw materials group in your respective organizations to have it also have all of the material metadata, right? The warp, the weft, what is the material, like what are the available constructions, what can be done with the material, what has been done with the material that is currently scanned. I think eventually we can get to the point where we're just developing materials virtually without ever requiring a physical, just like how you could do with color. So that's where PVH is, right? We're getting to the point now where everybody in the supply chain is so comfortable with color because we've showcased what can be done with reflectance curves. We showcased what can be done with spectrophotometers and colorimeters at varying parts in the process, that now when a designer requests a brand new color wherever it comes from, if they're messing with RGB values in Illustrator or Photoshop or whatever else, and say, hey, Ryan, hey, global color team, make this a color, we can reach out to our partners or global dye and chemical companies, third parties like Nativic, and say, hey, here's a snapshot of a color under Illuminate RGB data. I need this on, I need this on 60/40 cotton poly.
Right,
And they can come back with reflectance curves, dye formulations to match that color that they came up with under multiple illuminants now.
right.
And we can start with a digital color and then have everybody, like you would normally, match that to those digital tolerances throughout the entirety of the process. I think slow and steady, we'll be able to get there for materials. We just need to define the metadata. We need to, just like how we have spectrophotometers and colorimeters, partner with RM, the raw materials groups, partner with design to get them comfortable so they can see that the virtualized material is the same as the physical material. And then we can start moving forward and keeping everything digital.
And I want to bring up, because you highlighted one thing, is
Yeah.
if somebody's designing now, the old process is I have a swatch, I mail it in, I get a couple of swatches back, and we go back and forth. If I'm now comfortable working inside a spectral curve to understand the color, and I still have a physical swatch right now, one thing that being digital helps me for is under different illuminants. And I've seen tons of
Yeah.
samples of the shirt looks great under one illuminant, but you put it on the second one, all of a sudden the white bands light up, but other
Yeah.
white bands don't. And so you might be choosing a color, but because you're not specifying the full spectral curve as well, you could end up with other colors or perceived colors under
Yeah.
different lighting,
Well,
where if
that's
you
why
work in a digital workflow, it is now coming back to you as a consistent color
yeah.
under multiple light sources, which is really important.
That's exactly where I was going, right? If you, whether you're dealing with Pantone or Chroma or CSI or whomever else in the background, you're technically dealing with the global dye and chemical companies and the dyes used on that color standard, right? And the inherent or the potential for inconstancy that comes along with that color standard, right? I love this color in the environment that I selected it, but unless you're aware, you may not realize it has a particular level of inconstancy where that color flares from ultralume to daylight to incandescent to cool white, etc. So you're
Right.
exactly right in developing a color standard digitally from the very beginning. And this is one of the advantages of digital, right? Like now
Yes.
design, now upstream can see how that color looks under those different illuminants in whatever
Hmm.
software that they're working with, and they can decide if they like it or not. Now, therein lies, I think, the level of partnership, right? The dye and chemical companies you're working with, the third
Yep.
parties like Metific or whomever else that you might be working with, those who are helping you develop that digital color from scratch at the beginning to limit the level of inconstancy, if at all possible. I mean, you're
Right.
always going to run into inconstancy, right? I mean, with the exception of absolute white and absolute black, like most colors are inconstant.
Yep.
It's being able to mitigate it such that it's reduced as much as possible.
Yeah, and to your point, I always say it, when we measure something, look at it's a point in time.
Eh,
But we can control it better if we have data around that point in time, as opposed to a subjective interpretation of that color at that point in time.
Right
It's
now,
very, very
design's
different.
making right now design's making. Oh, so what's the quote? Anybody competent in what they do moves to streamline their processes and procedures so they can pay attention to a higher class of problems,
Hmm.
right? This is, in my mind, design doing just that. They potentially now have set aside the analog. They've set aside the visual subjectivity. They're they have trust in virtualized color that are visualized accurately on screen. They're trusting the data, the metadata associated with that color, associated with that material. And now they can start making those elevated decisions. Here's how my color looks under multiple illuminants.
Right.
I remember one time after having gone through this for a couple of years, a designer actually came up to me and said, hey Ryan, could you engineer a color to flare under daylight? I was like, well, why would you want to do that? Typically, you don't want it to
Want
do
it to
that.
flare.
Yeah, you want the color to be exactly the same under, your primary light, your secondary light, your tertiary light. And he goes, yeah, but I think it'd be really neat if you had like a T-shirt or a dress shirt, and when you were inside under, under office light, store light, whatever, incandescent light, that it was normal. It was a straight, solid
Right.
shirt. But then when you walked outside, it said, I'm cool, or like a logo popped, or like, so they were, once they realized, what metamerism, what inconstancy, reflectance curves, what these things were, you had right away, you had design being design.
Yeah.
And they were moving to leverage things like metamerism, things like inconstancy for design effects. That's elevated thinking, and that can only come through trust, partnership, and just the education that comes through osmosis, being around it and being in it.
For those who don't know, metamerism is where you have one color, but it behaves or looks different under different lighting conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So what I hear happened is you had a designer who began to understand the spectral data and was able to design something using that data in a new creative way where the text on the shirt would change under different illuminants, where one was actually a solid shirt. Did I understand that?
Yeah, we did it a couple of different ways. We had a couple of garments made where we took different material yarn for like a sewing and embroidery logo, and then a couple of prints where we used different dyes on the material, where we matched both materials under one light, but
Mm-hmm.
purposefully partnered with a third party to develop one to be inconstant,
Right.
significantly more inconstant than the other one under a different light. So it popped from like, green to brown, or, gray to purple, things like that. It
And
was
that may
pretty neat, actually.
it's fun. It sounds fun. And again, that's where we talk about partnerships, that design and procurement and the materials group, they have to form a partnership, because
Hmm.
once they understand what the expectations are and build that trust, design can go design, and the color materials people can scan the materials, monitor the materials, develop new colors for the materials they have. And then procurement, obviously understanding who the best suppliers are who can manage and execute to the design requirements.
Yeah.
So it really is a nice relationship that can happen. Uh,
It just
so
takes time. It just
it
takes
takes
time.
it
And
takes
the
time.
industry has done that with color. And now I think the next hill, I mean,
Yeah.
the industry, a lot of people in the industry are still dealing with color, like still working with color. But really the next, I guess, frontier, the next hill is now doing that with all of the metadata associated with material.
Right. And that's where, things like the X-ray TAC, or um, the
SpectraVision, MetaView, yeah.
SpectraVision, the Visu, that's all scanning in physical materials. That's
Right.
scanning in your library of physical materials and then virtualizing them into, in one case, it's a light booth that has a digital back screen so that you can build that trust, as we said,
Right.
of you can't really tell the difference between what's on the screen and what's right in front of the screen in this light booth. And that's kind of part of that transition to a full digital workflow, is to build that trust
Yeah.
in what you see.
Yeah, I mean, there's two schools of thought, right? There are the people who are competent enough, they're aware enough, where they, if they have all of the metadata defined, and they're comfortable with the software, they can potentially just develop straight digital, just like how, our level of comfortability, we could go straight with a digital color from the very beginning and be comfortable with it throughout the entirety of the process, because we know where it was developed. We know that we've matched that. I'm just making this up. Those RGB values under this particular illuminant. We know we've tagged what we've wanted. It has been minimized for inconstancy on the material that we picked, and we're good with it throughout the entire process. I'm sure that there are those people out there who are comfortable with that, going straight digital with materials from the beginning. Um, but
I don't think it's competency, though. I think
okay.
it's two things. It's not competency for me, it's trust, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
that has been the inherent problem, is I don't trust the next department to execute to what my vision is.
Well, that's the
So
two paths, right? Yeah.
right,
So if you do have that level of trust, if you do have that level of comfortability with the data that you defined or that you've worked with your partner to define, you could just go straight digital with materials. But
mhm,
I would agree with you. You're exactly right. There's the larger majority, right? You have the adoption curve. There's the
right,
larger majority who want to potentially see it, want to, just like how you would walk up to a spectrophotometer, scan it in, and know that that instrument read in what I just put there. So it
mhm,
saw what I wanted it to see. There's going to be those people who say, okay, I just saw this TAC, this MetaView, this SpectraVision scan in the material that I received from this
right.
supplier, and I can see it now on screen. I know it's accurate. Um, But without that level of trust, you're exactly right. There may be people who push back. Yeah.
Push back. And again, we're humans, we're tactile, we like that hand feel. And when you're trying to get buy-in also from not just between two departments, but maybe from the senior level or another department, those departments may need something more virtualized as opposed to just going, no, just trust me, it'll
Right.
be this, right? So it's a tool for that in-between transition stage for things. But, you know, brands are starting to digitize their whole library.
Well, they need
We
to,
and they
especially
need
with,
to.
yeah, especially with the way the world is going right now. I mean, with people working remotely, different types of overseas offices, mills, vendors, and things like that. Coming in and out of the COVID situation. They may not be available to have people visit the facility directly.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, it's becoming a requirement for the industry to be able to communicate digitally, to communicate virtually. We have to do this.
Right. And we have to. And with COVID, you're not going to go into the office. And so being able to have those whole complete libraries digitized so
Mhm.
that people can work virtually is going to be a transition, but a very good and healthy transition. Um, so I look forward to learning more about and seeing how that happens.
Yeah,
And
it
maybe next
really.
time we can
uh
visit in the office and show some real samples of how you're doing this.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, hopefully when everything opens back up and we get back to some semblance of normal, I look forward to it.
Yes. Ryan, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. This is Shoshana Burgett from colorkarma.com. Have a wonderful and colorful day.
Bye, guys.